and go.
Got it. All right. So for everyone who's
she muted herself.
I didn't mean to mute
There you
myself.
go.
I think it happened automatically. All right. So
That's
for
okay, go
everyone
ahead.
who's here, thank you so much for joining us today. If you don't know me, I'm Erica Kingsbury. I'm the president for AMU APU's Criminology Club. We have a couple other board members joining us today, but you may hear Ree talk in the background. She's our awesome secretary, and she is live streaming this to Facebook for us as well. We are recording the meeting today, just so you're aware. So we've got hopefully everybody's video and audio muted except for those who are speaking. But thank you again. And I'm going to do a little introduction for Jen and George before they get started. If you did not read my email, this should clarify a few things, but Jennifer Bucholtz and George Jared have been working together for about 4 years to tackle an unsolved murder of Rebecca Gould, who was killed in 2004. They've used crowdsourcing techniques and have been super involved in Facebook groups and just really getting her story out there to try and bring the killer to justice. They're going to talk a lot more about the cases that they're working on in their presentation, so I won't dwell on that too much. But Jen is a professor and criminal investigator. She's a professor at AMU. I'm not sure if anywhere else, Jen, but you can always mention that. She's also the lead advisor for AMU's cold case investigative team. And George is an author and an investigative journalist. And he also works as an advisor on the AMU cold case investigative team. They teamed up, and I actually have a copy of the book Silent Silhouette that you two wrote together. And I really enjoyed following along and sort of expanding on what is in that book through more recent developments that have been shared to the Facebook groups and things. And I will share links to those pages toward the end of our presentation today for anybody who's joining who wants to read some more. But whenever you guys are ready, I know you have a lot to get through, so go ahead and get started.
Well, you pretty much introduced us. I teach forensics and criminal justice at AMU, and I'm a criminal investigator for my local sheriff's department. And I kind of float around the department and help with financial crimes and homicide crimes and cold cases primarily. And I'm an Army veteran. So, and then I always forget, but I'm a true crime author. George always has to remind me to say that. Yes. And George and I both host AMU's investigative podcast called Break the Case.
That's right. That's how I learned who you were and how to start
gotcha.
Following along with your work.
George?
Pretty much the same what was said before. I'm an investigative journalist. I mean, I've literally written about everything in the world, but true crime is something I've written a lot about. I've done stories about agriculture, business, politics. I've done a lot of stories with the military, actually, a lot of military veterans, stuff like that. I've interviewed Holocaust survivors, entertainers, a president or two, throw them in there. So I've written about a lot of stuff, but true crime just sucks me in. And then me and Jen became real good friends, and we just had like comparable skill sets, and we had some goals in mind in this space. And so that's what we're trying to execute at this time.
So I'm going to share my screen, and we've got PowerPoint presentation that we're going to talk everybody through. Is that showing full screen for everybody, or is it not in? Yeah. There we go. Okay. So George and I have worked 4 cases together. We're going to quickly go through the first 2 that we worked on, and then we kind of want to focus a little bit more on our 2 current ones, because there's a lot of really amazing things happening with both of those. Not that amazing things didn't happen with the others, but we'd like to talk about more current stuff. So the first 2 that we teamed up on was the murder of Rebecca Gould. She was murdered in 2004. And then the unsolved murder of Debbie Williamson, who was murdered in 1975 in Lubbock, Texas. And so a lot of people ask us, well, what does the term crowdsourcing mean? So this is just sort of our own definition and how we utilize people in our investigations. So essentially just enlisting the help of anybody and everybody who wants to be of assistance. Don't need to have an investigative or law enforcement background to help investigate a cold case. And we're going to talk through some of the skill sets that people have brought to the table that me and George don't have, but that have been really, really helpful. So basically, it's just, enlisting the help of members of the public from all over the world, literally, with different backgrounds. And they bring, different perspectives and analysis to the table. And that has been incredibly helpful. So George will tell you a little bit about how he and we got started.
So Rebecca Gould vanished on or about September 20th, 2004. I was working at a local newspaper at the time as a journalist. I'd gone to college to be a lawyer, but I met a lot of poor and miserable lawyers. And so I decided that maybe I could be one or the other, but I didn't want to be both. And so I decided to take a job at a newspaper. And a few months into my job there, I get a call that Rebecca Gould had vanished. And what you're seeing on the screen right there is the actual missing poster that her mother handed me. It was the first murder case I ever worked on. And since then, I've worked on dozens. But on the back is the first notes I took when she vanished. This was about 2 days after she left. And Jen, if you want to kick forward to the timeline, we can kind of
Sure.
with that. So this is the window of death. And actually the window of death actually goes back to probably Sunday night. And so basically what happened is on the morning of September 20, 2004, she was staying at the kind of like a love interest, a guy that she was kind of on again, off again with. She went to college in Fayetteville, a town that was about 4 hours away from Melbourne. And so that morning she reportedly took the love interest, Casey McCullough, to his work at the Sonic there in Melbourne. And then she returned to his home to collect her dog and her clothes and her personal effects for the return trip home for college. And along that way, she was supposed to pick up her sister Danielle. Well, obviously, sometime after she dropped him off, something happened. And he didn't go back to his home that day. He went out with some friends that night. They went to the movies, went out to eat, did that kind of thing. And then he went and stayed the night at a friend's house. Well, just so we're clear, all four friends that he talked to that night, he told them, he got a phone call that night and he told all four friends that she was missing. We know now, because we have a case file, that he called his own cell phone. So anyway, fast forward to the next morning, he goes straight from the friend's house to work. And at work, a manager there tells him to go home and change his shirt because he hadn't bothered to go home to get any clothes for the next work day. So then he goes home, gets a shirt, and then comes back to work. Well, a few minutes later, a police officer is dispatched to do a welfare check at the house. And Rebecca's mother had called because they couldn't find her. So the officer takes Casey back to his home. They go inside, and inside the home, they find a bunch of disturbing evidence. They find bloody sheets in the washing machine. They find a mattress that had been stripped of all the bedding, and there was blood. It had been flipped and there was blood on the other side. They found bloody pillows underneath the bed, another bloody pillow in plain sight. The bedroom was in disarray. Her clothes were everywhere, suitcases. There was one suitcase missing. Interesting enough, something else that was missing too was a loose piano leg from a piano in the house. Now, here's the thing. So Rebecca's car was there, her keys were there, her phone was there, all of her personal effects were there, including her uninjured Pomeranian dog named Lady. And that dog actually didn't die till just a few years ago, as a matter of fact. And so I spent the week out there with her family. I met her father, Dr. Larry Gould, as they searched for Rebecca. And on September 27th, 2004, they found her body off an embankment about 8 miles from the crime scene, as you can see. As you go all the way through Melbourne, going past every business in town, through a stoplight, and right before you get to the disposal site, the sheriff's department, actually, there's the turnoff to the sheriff department is there. But if you take it's like an ancient timber gravel road type thing that only loggers would use for the most part, you could get from the crime scene property all the way to this remote disposal site. Now, I was out there the morning when they found her body. It was the first murdered body I'd ever seen. And I've told people this before. It was the most horrifying thing I'd ever seen in my life up to that point. And unfortunately, it wasn't the most horrifying thing that I was going to do that day, though. When I went back to the sheriff's department, her father, Dr. Larry Gould, ran up to me and he said, did they find my daughter? And I said, Larry, you really need to talk to the sheriff. And he grabbed a hold of me and said, did they find my daughter? And I said, yes. And he started crying and his head went down into my stomach. And I'd known this guy for 5 days at this point.
And that's just the external, view of the exterior of the trailer where Rebecca was killed.
Yes.
So
I
we should talk about how we met up.
Yeah, okay. So fast forward to 2016, I wrote about it in a book. There really wasn't a lot going on in the case. The detective in the case had a false theory of who committed the crime. He thought this was some kind of drug deal gone wrong, even though there was no evidence from our autopsy or any evidence collected at the scene to indicate that there were any drugs involved at all. He just had a theory. He was a former narcotics cop, and so this is what he thought. And so fast forward to 2016, Dr. Gould and I reconnected. I've written about her case in a couple of books, and it caught the interest of a girl named Catherine Townsend. And she was the reporter for the Discovery Channel at the time. And she wanted to do a podcast called Hell and God. And the podcast came out in the fall of 2018. And I think I did 6 episodes with her, and the podcast became very, very popular. And so one of the people who heard the podcast was Jennifer. And so Jennifer heard the podcast and she contacted me. And, we tell people this every time we talk about it. She asked if she could talk to me on the phone for 15 minutes. And our first conversation lasted 3 hours and 21 minutes because she recorded it. So we're not just making that up. And so then we began an odyssey to try and solve this case, or to try to figure out who did it. And so one of the things that we decided to do, a tool that I noticed before when the first podcast had come out, was these Facebook pages had formed, and a lot of people were getting in there and talking, especially a lot of people connected to the family, and they were making statements and saying things. And I thought, Jennifer and I had a conversation one night. I said, we need to start a Facebook page and see if we could kind of recapture that type of reaction. And so we started a Facebook page, and some of the same sort of things started happening. Interestingly enough, Casey, the sort of ex-boyfriend, hit a person related to him, joined our page almost immediately. And this guy was living in the Philippines. He worked on oil rigs all over the world. He was originally from the United States, though. He'd married a Filipino woman, and he lived on a plantation there. And he started leaving messages on our page. Jennifer, go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah, this is just a small sampling of some of the comments that he posted. We have a lot more in our Facebook group that you can read, but in the essence of time, we had to, we can't go through all of them tonight, but I just picked out a few here that shows his interaction on different posts throughout 2019 and 2020 in this Facebook group. And when we form a Facebook group for a victim, we're not just throwing information out, or it's not a one-way road. We want that interaction because me and George can't think of everything. And so we found the brainstorming and new ideas on behalf of other people was incredibly helpful. Plus, getting people from that local community to chime in and give us information is helpful too. So you can just see a couple examples here of comments that William Miller posted. And then on January 16, 2020, I got this. And I will preface this by saying we knew who William Miller was when he joined our group. So we had someone who came to us basically through a crowdsourcing effort who built out Casey McCullough's entire family tree. And because of her, we knew that William Miller was Casey's first cousin. So when he joined our group, we took notice, but we just thought, our theory was that Casey probably committed this murder. So we thought, well, William probably doesn't think we know, or he thinks we don't know who he is. He lives across the planet. He thinks maybe he can just be a mole for Casey, and that's how we treated him. So obviously, we let him post comments and message me and whatnot. We wanted that, but we were careful. I was very careful about my interactions with him because there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that we never publicize. But anyways, and again, I'm only going to show a couple of the messages that he sent me directly, but the very first one was asking me about the timeline of the murder. And this is a topic he was fixated on through the months that he was in our group and messaging me, was, did the murder happen Sunday night or Monday morning? And so with what we know now, I think that's really telling, because actually we don't know for sure what day Rebecca was killed. But, you can see, he says, I'm just trying to help out. And like I do with everybody, I thank them for reaching out, like, appreciate your insight, and we'll chat about stuff. And he really didn't raise a lot of red flags. I mean, he maybe was trying to dig on a couple issues, but I didn't feel like he was heavily digging. And so, but I did ask him, so how did you hear about this case? You live in the Philippines. I mean, what sparked your interest? And he just said, you can see it there on the third message. He just said podcast, which I assume meant Catherine's Hellengone podcast. I'm like, okay. So he is purposely hiding his connection and relationship with this family. So something's up. And I asked him again a couple months later, I can't remember if I asked you, but like, how did you find out about this case? Have you ever been to Arkansas? And his answer was just, I've been to all 50 states. So I'm like, okay, he's definitely hiding that connection. And so these are just a few messages. I'm going to move on from this because we don't have time to go through every single thing. But if you come onto our Facebook group or you message us, we can share a whole lot more. So then on November 8th, the morning of November 8th, I woke up to a text message from Dr. Gould saying, call me immediately and don't talk to anybody. And my heart just started like beating on my chest because I knew what that had to mean. And so, and George has a small anecdote about actually November 7th, the day that William Miller was brought in.
Technically, he was arrested on November 7th, which is actually my birthday, and he was arrested in Cottage Grove, Oregon, which is about an hour from where I grew up. So, happy birthday to me. He confessed to this murder. Now, I'll say this, and again, you guys can jump on our Facebook page or even message us directly later. There's a lot to get to with that, but he confessed to the murder. He said, what happened was William was Casey's first cousin, but he didn't live in Arkansas. He lived in Texas, but he had come up to visit his mom, Linda, and his brother, Jeremy, who lived about 2 miles from Casey's house at the time. So he comes up to visit them. Reportedly, he visited the house the night before, talked to Casey for about 10 minutes, maybe saw Rebecca, whatever. And then he said he returned the next morning, hid his truck out in the field behind Casey's trailer, and then he went and knocked on the door. And he said he needed to use the phone. He was Casey's cousin. And he said he was having car trouble. So he goes and gets on the phone and pretends to be on the phone. And while he's pretending to be on the phone, he said the psychotic urge to kill her just overwhelmed him. And he said that she was wearing a pair of shorts and that she went into the bedroom and laid down in bed. And of course, I'm sure all the females who are watching this right now are thinking to themselves, I'm sure I would just go back to bed if this dude showed up. He's 5'5" and he's 310 pounds. I'm just going to go get in bed. Well, then he says he just walked by the piano and the piano leg just fell on the ground and he picked it up and he went in there and he hit her in the head twice. The second time he hit her, it shattered. And then he said he went and retrieved a necktie from the closet and then he strangled her on the bed until she was dead. And then if you remember that route we were talking about, he took her body, put it in a low riding S10 pickup truck. And then he drove the route in broad daylight all the way around to the dump site, all the way through Melbourne. Now, after, when he finally was convicted, the day he was sentenced, he told Dr. Gould a different story. He told Dr. Gould that he didn't strangle her and that he gave her CPR and then he took that ancient gravel road. But there's a reason why he didn't want to say that he took the ancient gravel road. It's because only someone with local knowledge would know that road. And that's the problem, is that he was lying and telling different stories because he was trying to hide something. And we suspect that we know what he was trying to hide. He was trying to hide connections, possibly with other family members. And so anyway, just so you guys know, just because he was convicted on October 18th, 2022. And just because he got convicted, I think we've probably done more work on this case from October 18th to now than we probably did the previous year and a half while we were kind of in limbo waiting for this to come about. And so if you guys do follow this case or follow us, if you stay on our Facebook page, we've obviously been releasing all the case files on it, which again, completely, there's absolutely no proof in that case file. And this is something Jennifer and I talk about. And this is something, I guess, a point we need to stress to everyone is the police in the case file had absolutely no proof that she was alive Monday morning. None, zero, no proof at all. And they still let this theory that she was alive Monday morning and dropped Casey off at work, they let that propagate in the town and among the local population for 16 years. And now we have the case file, and we know that none of that's true. And that's why it's important to let other people look at the case file, because here's what's funny is in 2019, Jennifer and I had lengthy conversations where we surmised that there was no proof that she was alive Monday morning, and indeed she wasn't.
Yeah. So this whole situation with luring a killer out of hiding inadvertently led to us being asked to give a presentation on Rebecca's case at CrimeCon. By the time we got to CrimeCon, which for those of you who don't know is the biggest true crime conference in the world, and they hold it every year in a different US city. It was the biggest honor of my career so far. But when we went to CrimeCon, William had been arrested. So like George said, we were kind of in limbo. So we're like, well, let's see what transpires at CrimeCon, and maybe we can do this again and find another victim's family to help. So that led us to the unsolved murder of Debbie Williamson, who was stabbed 17 times in the carport of her home in Lubbock, Texas, on the night of Sunday, August 24th, 1975. On the left is her wedding photo, obviously. She was married just, what, 2.5 months, I think 10 weeks before she was murdered. Her husband is there on the right with her. She was 18, he was about 21 at the time of her murder. He's been cleared as far as I'm concerned. And then here's a rough timeline that we'll run through real quick about, or shows Debbie's actions the night of her murder. George, you want to talk about that, or you want me to?
Yeah, I want you to do the next slide, so I'll do this one. So Debbie was eating dinner with her mom, dad, stepdad, and half-sister at the local Pizza Inn, where her husband, Doug, was the manager, and a sort of ex-boyfriend of her, a guy that she dated a little bit, Paul, was the cook. And Paul and Doug were friends as well. So around 8:30 that night, they dropped Debbie back at her house. And the whole premise of that night was that she was going to return to the Pizza Inn because they were doing inventory, and she was going to help Doug do that. And she also needed to return $140 that he had borrowed from the Teal at the Pizza Inn to buy a CB radio. So at 8:43, Paul clocks out from the Pizza Inn, which is interesting about that. Once we got the case file, we figured out that he clocked out at 8:43 because that's what his time card said, but he told the police he clocked out at 9:10, and he told the police this the day after she died. And that's actually a key, we think that's a very key detail. One thing that he asked, and I want everybody that's listening to this to think about this. When he left, before he left, he went and talked to Doug, who was his friend, and he said, Doug, oh, and I should add this detail. Doug and Debbie are living in the house that Doug grew up in. His parents gave that to them as a wedding present when they got married. So this is a house that when Paul and Doug were in high school together, Paul would come over and stay the night, okay? And so he asked, he was going on a date that night. He asked if he could take a shower at the house if Debbie wasn't home. And so Doug calls Debbie, and we put 9 p.m. on there, but it could really be anywhere from, 8:40 to about 9:10 as far as we know. Doug calls Debbie, and Debbie says she's watching a movie, and when she gets done, she'll come up and help him. And then Doug relays the message, hey, Paul wants to come by and take a shower. Well, when he tells Paul this, Paul says, well, if Debbie's home, I don't want to go there. Okay. So from 8:43 to 10 o'clock that night, we don't know where Paul's at. So from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. is the window of death. We're pretty certain that it's much earlier in that time frame, just based on the fact that she was supposed to be back at the Pizza Inn around 10. We actually even know the movie she was watching that night. She was watching The Odd Couple with Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon, and that movie ended around 9:23 that night. Okay, so Doug starts calling her mom, dad, friends. He even calls the other manager of the other Pizza Inn that's just down the street. He's trying to figure out where she's at. Nobody knows. But it's 1975. It's not as uncommon for people to be out of pocket. So he's not as worried as you might be today with cell phones and all that. So finally, around 1 o'clock, a friend of his named Lex had showed up at the Pizza Inn to help do inventory. And Paul was supposed to come back after his date to help with the inventory. And so Doug leaves. He left a waitress named Mary Ann. She was the only other worker that was there that night. And so he goes home. It's pitch black. He sees the back door is open. He stumbles across her body, which is on the back porch area. and her pants had been pulled down, her shirt had been pulled up. And so he returns to the Pizza Inn. A lot of people thought, well, why didn't he go in the house? Well, here's the thing. He was in shock and probably thought that the killer may have still been in the house. And there was no cell phones, obviously. So the Pizza Inn was actually only a couple of minutes away. So it actually made sense for him to go back there. It'd be like running to a payphone, basically, back in the day. And so he calls 911, and then the police arrive on the crime scene. And Jen, what did they find?
So forgive my artist or lack of artist skills here. This is actually someone we could crowdsource, George, is someone who's really good with graphic design, because
I think you're pretty good at it, but
it's not great, but everybody will get it. Okay, so at least it's self-explanatory for the most part. But we know that Debbie incurred most of her injuries in the carport, and that's based on the amount of blood that was found on the driver's side of her car. So that's the primary crime scene. She may have been confronted when she came out of her back door. We don't know for sure. Items from her purse were found kind of strewn around. You see the coins, a pen, her car keys were found. But what really caught my attention about this case is the killer didn't just leave her where she fell. They dragged her into the most lit area of the property under the back porch light, and then partially disrobed her by pulling up her shirt and bra and pulling down her jeans and underwear. Her shoes and her stockings were in place. We don't believe there was a sexual assault, but she was left very exposed under a light. And to me, that says the killer is trying to convey some kind of message. They then made a feeble attempt, I think, to stage the scene as a burglary using a garden hoe to break out the small kitchen window. And if you go to our Facebook group for Debbie or my YouTube channel, which I'll show you later, or I'll give you the link to later, you can see actual photos and footage of this backyard, because we've been there twice now and it's exactly the same. So this is just a general overview of the crime scene. When Doug arrived home, he said that the back door was standing open. The screen door was shut, but the actual door itself was standing open. These are a couple of actual photos from the newspaper back then. So on the left, you can see the front of Debbie's car and then the drag marks from the carport to the back porch where she likely took her last breath. And then the one on the right is just a different view of the back porch, and she was found right up against that step in a pool of blood. So I'll let George talk about this slide. I hate even bringing this up, but we have to, because it's just a critical part of why Debbie's investigation got completely derailed.
So in 1984, there was a guy, and you guys may have heard of him, a man named Henry Lee Lucas, who was running around the country confessing to pretty much every unsolved murder that was on the books with every agency. At one point, he confessed to over 600 murders that he didn't commit, but he confessed to Debbie's murder, and the whole case was profiled in the Netflix series, The Confession Killer, and that's a picture of Debbie's mom holding a picture of her high school portrait on that show. And Debbie's parents were the first to go out and say, wait a minute, Henry Lee Lucas, you didn't kill our daughter. I mean, the ridiculousness of that whole situation. He would have had to have traveled in 1 month in 1977 in October. He would have had to travel 32,000 miles by car to kill all these people that he claimed to have killed that month. So quite literally, he would travel over 1,000 miles a day and then rampage and kill all these people, and then jump in his car and drive to some other part of the country and kill somebody else. So it was absolutely ludicrous. They proved that he didn't do it, but there was one fortunate outcome from that for us. The DA was so mad at the family for proving that he didn't do it. The DA slid the entire case file over to Bob and Joyce, the mom and stepdad. And so the family had the case file from that point on. Now, most of it was, I hate to say it, like with a lot of case files, most of the stuff was worthless. However, the detail about Paul asking him to take the shower was in there. And there were some other details. In fact, there's details we have never released, Jen. And what's funny is there's a huge detail in there that we didn't even put in our book.
Nope.
And you know which one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So it was bad that this happened to her and her family, but it was good from an investigative standpoint. And Jen, I have a friend who's now both our friends, and he's a knife expert. And Jen, it's really funny. We were talking to him, And he told us something very interesting about the murder weapon and the connection it had to two of our suspects. Go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah. So part of what we bring to the table in terms of our investigations and bringing new stuff to law enforcement is expert analysis that they've not had before. There's very few police departments that have a knife expert on hand. So we got a ton of new information from Jeff Schaefer, who's long-term knife expert. And the first thing was that he probably identified the type of knife that was used against Debbie. It was definitely a double-bladed fixed blade knife. So for those who don't know, if you look at a typical kitchen knife, it just has one side that's sharpened. Well, looking at Debbie's injuries, he knew right away that this was a knife that had both sides of the blade sharpened. That's not as common, so that helps. And it was a fixed blade, so not a switch blade, and probably had a significant hilt, which stops your hand from sliding down the blade of the knife when you're using it. So anyway, so he helped us narrow down the knife, and he believes it's a World War II style knife that was particularly issued to soldiers who fought at Normandy. And two of the persons of interest, or people who act suspiciously, had fathers who fought in the war at that time. Secondly, the other thing he brought to light for us is that we wondered why Debbie didn't have defensive wounds. And then Jeff identified the lethal wound, which was a stab that went through two parts of her heart. And he sent us some videos and some research, and we learned that if you get stabbed in that manner, you have about 12 to 15 seconds before you collapse. And so we opined that the first injury was probably that lethal wound, and that's why Debbie, she may have tried to run a few feet and then just collapsed in the carport and didn't have defensive wounds because she just couldn't, her heart was not hardly functioning. So that was, we provided all of that insight and analysis to the Lubbock PD. We could talk about this for hours, but we did write a book. Debbie would be 65 now, and a lot of people in her generation prefer reading over podcasts or YouTube or technology. And so that was a big reason that we decided to just write her story so that we could, be the victim's voice on another media platform. So the QR code there goes to the Amazon website where you can purchase the book, either paperback, hardback, or Kindle version. And just know that a majority of the proceeds from book sales books that we sell go towards our travel expenses when we go to investigate these cases, because AMU doesn't pay for it. Nobody pays for our travel expenses. We're completely self-funded. So if you like reading true crime, or somebody who likes true crime, I'll just pitch our book for you. And there's a ton more information. I talked to Paul for 37 minutes. George also talked to Paul and a couple of the other persons of interest. And those conversations are detailed in the book, along with a lot of other stuff. So if you like that type of thing, we'd appreciate if you purchase it.
Yeah, and Jen, I'll add one small detail. We also have a section in there about William Miller.
Yes.
Analysis from Rebecca's case. And also going back to that knife wound, one key thing that we learned was it was a behavioral, we don't know exactly how she died or the circumstances under which she was attacked, but we do know one thing: for that wound to come into the armpit, her arm had to be up and extended out like this. So that may give us some critical details as to how she came into conflict with the person who ended up killing her, because it looks like she was facing them face to face.
Yeah, we have some recreation stuff we did. It's on my YouTube channel. Like I said, I'll give you the link at the end. But when we were out there last year, we actually got a dummy. We filled it with sand to try to match the size and weight of Debbie. And we did some of our own recreation. I have some of those videos that you guys can watch if you're interested in that.
Oh, and I just thought Paul actually came up with a cockamamie story when he was talking to me about how he took a shower at that house the day before the murder. So if you want to read about that, it's in the book.
Okay, so these are the two current investigations we have going on. Last summer, we got about 70 submissions mostly from family members of victims asking for our help on cases. We had gained an incredible member of our team, I'll just call her Melissa, last year through Debbie's case. So her, me, and George were sort of teaming up, but she said, I wonder if we can tackle two cases. And I said, well, we need another you. because you need a pair. You can't do this by yourself. I mean, we literally most weeks are working a second full-time job on whatever case we're working. One person can't do it. But anyways, I'll introduce you to Judy Petty's investigative team in a second, but we did end up getting a fourth person and we divided up. And so George and I are tackling the case of Linda Malcolm on the right, and Justin and Melissa Rimmel are tackling the Judy Petty case. And we literally just got home from West Virginia 2 days ago after helping Justin and Melissa there and law enforcement hand in hand with Judy's case. So I'll give you a quick overview. Judy Petty was basically the primary caregiver for her grandmother. Judy was 48 years old and living at her grandmother's house in a town in West Virginia called Parkersburg. On February 6th, 2008, she went to return some books to the local library and went for a walk, and she vanished. Did not come home, was never found. Nobody could figure out where she went. Well, her father, long story short, her father drove out to their family farm, which is about 13 miles away, on February 7th, the next day, and found the entire farmhouse, outbuilding, and other structures engulfed in flames. So somebody had set fire to it. And he's, calling the fire department and stuff, but he's also telling them, like, my daughter's missing. I don't know where she is. Ultimately, 2 days later, Judy's remains were found in this cellar that you're seeing on your screen. And originally, this was an outbuilding with 2 levels. It had a ground level with, walls and a regular roof, and then the cellar was underneath. But obviously, after the fire, the entire top part collapsed into the cellar. So these are the team leaders for Judy's investigation. Melissa's on the left in the cellar last October when we went out, and there's Justin peering over the edge. Melissa is a licensed social worker. She has a minor in law enforcement, but she has not worked in law enforcement. But she's excellent because she works in hospice, dealing with family members who are going through a traumatic experience or who have been through one. And Justin is a long-term podcaster, Marine veteran, combat veteran, and has helped on a lot of other cold case investigations. So they teamed up, and George and I have sort of, just been helping them in the background.
Yeah, hold on. We'll go back to that slide for a second.
Sure.
One aspect about this case that was odd to us was that when Judy left her house, she walked over 13 miles. And I'm not trying to weight shame anybody, but she weighed about 240 pounds. And so it was almost inconceivable to us that a woman would walk 13 miles down a desolate, and I'm talking desolate road. And she took a route that the family had never known none of the family had ever taken this route to their family farm ever. And she walked it at nighttime on February 6th. Now the weather conditions were pretty good. One thing that was valuable to us going there and being on the ground was we saw that the route was much more treacherous than we thought, number one, which was unbelievable. But number two, in speaking with the family, it was not uncommon for her to walk long distances. It was something she enjoyed doing, and she did a lot. And she loved this farm. So at that point, it was a little bit more believable to us that she could have possibly did this. And of course, we got the investigative file, and we were able to, and I told Jennifer, I remember telling you this, there better be, I said there better be, like, if only 10 people drive that road on a Wednesday night, there better be 5 reports in there saying, hey, we saw somebody on the road. Because I've lived in a rural area before, and if you saw a scene like this, you would definitely say to the police, hey. And sure enough, Jen, what did we find in there? We found 5 reports of people who did see her that night along that road, and where she was, the sightings where she was reported, she was moving at a pretty consistent clip through most of the night.
I literally, the first time I went out there last fall, George wasn't there, I dismissed this theory that she walked out there at night. I'm like, there's no way. These are the most darkest, dangerous, curviest roads. But then we got the case file, and there's 5 sightings, and they basically match up. And I was like, okay, I have to rethink this. And me and George are like that. We might put something aside for a while, but new information comes about. It's like, okay, we have to rethink this. And now we have to work off the assumption that she did actually walk out to this farm.
Yeah, I mean, witness statements, you can't trust them, but if there's 5 of them, and if the math works, and for the vast majority of them, the math works, and math doesn't lie.
So going into this case, and I'll try to keep this part short, but we had a big struggle with law enforcement. The sheriff didn't want to talk to us. He didn't even want the autopsy released. It was a fight for a while. Last October, we met with the chief deputy of the sheriff's department. He was nice enough, but it was all lip service because he never followed through. And so finally I said, well, we can go above their heads to the state level or something, but let me try one more time with the sheriff. And I emailed him and I asked him directly, can you please assign a detective to this case because we have new information, but we don't have anyone to give it to. And he did. And so Doug Sturm, who is a detective with the local prosecuting attorney's office, badged, sworn, carries a weapon, everything, was assigned to it. And he called me like the next day and he goes, so how does this work? And I said, I'm not asking you for anything other than we're going to feed you tips and we need you to follow up on them. And we need to take, I need you to take recordings and information we get from people that we re-interview and compare it to their original statements. And he has been the most wonderful guy to work with. As you already heard, he has given us the entire case file. The last 4 days, or last weekend, we were in West Virginia for 4 days. He cleared his entire schedule and spent every day with us. He went out to the farm with us. He drove the routes with us. He was at dinner with us every night, strategizing for the next day. On Monday, he and I interviewed the top suspect in the case together. That guy changed our minds, which was surprising, but that's fine. But this is a photo here of us on Monday. I asked him to get a big map of the county, and this is Doug's on the left. You see me and Justin on the right, and we're discussing these routes, or the route Judy took, but also our strategy for interviewing that top suspect because he came in later that day.
Yeah, and he also spent days with Melissa interviewing people of interest in the case too. She came into town the day before Jennifer and I got there, and they scheduled interview after interview after interview, and she sat in all but one interview, and there was a good reason for her not to sit in the interview she didn't sit in. There was a little bit of a conflict there, and she recognized it, and that was kudos to her.
Yeah.
And it worked out great.
But this is exactly the vision George and I started out with, that we're hoping that we continue to fulfill, is bringing new information and skills that help law enforcement. Like George going to talk about his friend Alan, who's been over 30 years, been a firefighter arson expert. This department in front of you that you see has never had a good arson analysis of that scene, and Alan has just given him hours and hours of information and new content and new stuff to analyze. And so that's the point of me and George starting this team, is to try to bridge that gap and get law enforcement agencies to trust us that we know what we're doing, but we also know what needs to stay confidential, what needs to stay out of the public eye, but trust us enough to share that case file so that we can help them. So there's so much more in Judy's case, but we have one more to go over. Justin and Melissa created a podcast exclusively for Judy's case. It's called Safe Haven, The Unsolved Murder of Judith Petty. I think they got 11 or 12 episodes so far. So if you like the real-time investigative podcast type stuff, go take a listen. You'll really enjoy it. They've got a Facebook group, Justice for Judy. The reward is actually, as of last weekend, now $7,500 because we did a fundraiser, raised $2,500 more to add to that reward for her. So you can get a ton more information on their Facebook group, and their groups kind of mirror what me and George do. They want people discussing, brainstorming, giving their own input, thinking about things. Okay, so finally, I swear we could give like a 10-hour presentation on all of this, but so George and I got a submission last summer from an AMU student named Mike, whose aunt had been murdered in 2008. And Linda's case intrigued us pretty, I would say, right off the bat, George, I think, at least me.
Yeah, it did.
And so we did some background research on Linda and her case. We talked to Mike, the one who submitted it, talked to a couple of Linda's sisters about our methodology to, see what they thought. And they were very much on board with accepting our help. And so this is the current case George and I are investigating. I forget what my next slide is. Okay. You want to talk a little bit about the actual murder, George?
Yeah, Linda Malcolm was murdered, and we say on or about April 30th, 2008, because her window of death, I mean, Jen, I think we think it's roughly 12 hours,
Yeah.
maybe more, just based on the last time she was reportedly verifiably seen. Her house was, as you can see, the house was set on fire. She was stabbed about 18 times. She was a Navy vet, so she was living in the Port Orchard area. It's kind of a hub for naval activity, and so there's a lot of naval vets that live there. She was originally from Illinois. She loved living there. She was single, but she dated quite a bit. She had a pretty free style. She had a free lifestyle. She did what she wanted to do, according to all of her friends and family. And it was kind of a mystery as to what happened to her. She was found nude in her own bedroom, on the floor, next to her waterbed. And like looking at this house, I mean, I've seen lots of, I've dealt with a lot of fire in my life, in my career, and Jennifer has some too. But we needed to get somebody who knew about how fires work. And so Jennifer and I were talking one day, and she's like, we really need a fire expert. And it just hit me like you could have smashed me in the face with a brick. I have a friend who helps run a fire science academy. He was a fire chief in a town I knew, and he's a super, super smart guy. He's kind of a smart aleck with me, but I like him because of that. And we're really good friends. And his, I think Cindy just joined us, Jen.
She did.
She did. So the thing about Linda is she had some defensive wounds. So whoever attacked her, she fought back. And it was, here's the thing, we don't think it was a high level of overkill because of the number of wounds. It's because she had so many lethal wounds. And we can use Debbie's case as kind of an example. Debbie only had one wound that we know for sure would have killed her without immediate medical care, and that was the armpit wound. The other ones, she could have survived. Not saying she would have, but she would have had a chance. Linda had several lacerations to her liver that virtually no one could survive. And so she had, so we think that this was a rage-filled crime. And so anyway, let's see. Our next one.
Well, yeah, and she had two major injuries to her liver, and she actually had almost the exact same injury to her heart that Debbie had. It's through the right atrium, and we found that really interesting. But
yes,
but yeah, when I went to Port Orchard last fall, I met with the current coroner, who was not the coroner who oversaw Linda's case, but he is very he was very in tune with her case. He knows a lot about it. And so he talked me through the autopsy, and he explained that there's 4 lethal wounds. And so that told us like the person went well above and beyond what they needed to do to actually take her life. And then here's on season 3 of Break the Case, you're going to hear a whole interview with Alan Haskins, who's the arson expert. But you can just see, here's a little bit, it just gives you an idea of the damage to the house. But it was kind of superficial. He believes an accelerant was used. We're still working on determining if there was only one point of origin or multiples. But I'll go back real quick. If you look here, the roof is basically untouched. And so that's one clue that an accelerant was probably used. The inside of that house burnt really hot and fast, but it didn't take the structure down. And that's also kudos to the fire department, because they got there fairly quickly and were able to extinguish the fire. But you can see a little bit of the living room there on the left, and then that's Linda's car in the carport there on the right.
Oh, and one note, in Judy's case, she was so badly cremated in her case that they've never been able to determine even how she died.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
I don't like using the word fortunately with regards to any victim, but fortunately in Linda's case, we know for sure it's a homicide. We know for sure she was stabbed. So although she was not recognizable when found, her body was completely intact, and a full autopsy was able to be completed along with a toxicology. So that's obviously very helpful to us. So here's a little more information. If you want to join our group for Linda, Unsolved Murder of Linda Malcolm, that's kind of how we brand our Facebook groups. Whatever case we take on, it's always the unsolved murder of, and then the victim's name. So please feel free to join. Again, like, we encourage any participation or input or ideas that you have. We will be traveling up to Washington at the end of April for the 15-year anniversary of Linda's case, but we have a lot of stuff going on between now and then before we get there. And actually, Break the Case season 3 is supposed to launch tomorrow, so you'll get the first episode tomorrow.
It's going to. Bob said we're good.
What's that?
Bob said we're good after our.
Oh, okay, yeah, our sound guy,
Yeah.
George hosts Diamond State Murder Board, him and his co-host Andrew, and then sometimes I co-host. He'll cover the cases we're working on, but a lot of other cases too. So again, you know, if you like true crime, you can hear a lot of different cases and guests on his podcast. And then again, the podcast that was developed particularly for the Judy Petty case is Safe Haven. And right now they're on Judy's case, season 1. We'll see how that case turns out, and they might do a season 2, or they might just launch a whole new podcast channel for their next one. If you want to learn more, we set up just a general email for the podcast or case submissions, or, you know, anything to do with AMU. You can email us at breakthecaseamu@gmail.com. And then you've got our personal emails there too. On Twitter, I post almost exclusively case-related stuff. And then there's my YouTube channel where you can find a lot of videos of, you know, recreations that we've done on a case, or like in Rebecca Gould's case, when I went to the embankment and the overlook where her body was found, and I kind of talk viewers through my thoughts, or the route she supposedly drove that day. Like, the YouTube channel is exclusively for case-related content. So if you like videos, you can check that out. George? Anything else? I see there's like 30 questions in the chat. So
Yeah.
I know that was a really quick presentation, but we couldn't leave out any of the 4 cases because one just kind of leads to another, and we wanted to explain some of our team's methodology and how that has evolved, and it's going to continue to evolve through the years. So hopefully it was informative, but not confusing. So I don't know, Erica, do you want us to go through the chat? Do you want to read us questions, or what do you think?
I'm back. Sorry. We can go back and scroll. That way you don't have to worry about changing your screen too much. Hold on just a moment. I'm trying to make sure I didn't miss any first. All right. So a question that was submitted was, do you know if any of these cases have received the true crime show treatment, like investigation, discovery, etc.?
Rebecca's case has some. It was featured on Dr. Oz in 2018 when he still had his show. It's been on the Helen God podcast, which actually turned into a really popular podcast. I guess, Jen, we could say that we've been talking to some, national level TV programs, you know, some of the ones that you would, everybody on here would recognize and watch probably every Friday or Saturday night or whenever they come out.
I don't think it needs to be a secret. It's Dateline in 2020.
Yeah, Dateline in 2020. Well, and Cold Case Files.
And Cold Case Files, yeah.
And so they're all looking at them, and we've had conversations with them. And so Rebecca's case definitely. And here's the thing: most of those type of shows, they need the case to be solved or quote unquote solved. And so the last 3 that we talked about obviously are not. So Rebecca's would be the only one that would truly qualify. I was on a show one time called Still a Mystery on Discovery Channel, and it was covering the Amanda Tussing murder case that's never been solved because I wrote a book about it. And so maybe some of these cases might qualify for a show like that, but that's the only one so far.
Sure. Well, hopefully you can add to the list of qualifying cases by solving a few more.
We're going to.
Another question someone had is, how do you sign up to join the cold case group at APUS/AMU? And I'll expand on that. Can you give us a better idea of who's on the team? I know you guys are both advisors, but what kind of people do you have working with you, or is it just everybody?
We got everybody.
So Yeah, verbally, AMU has made the team official, but we don't have a landing page, meaning a website yet. That's the number one thing I've asked for. Me and George have also developed 2 8-week courses. One would be an intro to cold case investigations. The second one would be advanced, but they're from the perspective of us, meaning not traditional law enforcement. And the courses revolve around how to work a cold case if you don't have the case file. But with every big organization, there are some roadblocks. So we are trying to work through those, but know that those are in the works. And
Very cool.
our concept was that students that are interested in being an official member or maybe team leader on a case would complete both of those courses, but get credit, right? Like get 3 credits per course, which would go towards their major. And then that would give me and George a vetting process to determine, like, we know you're committed, we know, whatever.
Yes, you're willing to put in the work. Yeah.
Exactly. Because this isn't, so many people are like, oh, it's so cool what you do. Like, I always wanted to solve a cold case. Let me tell you that amount of hours and money.
Oh, of course.
Like, it's hard to even verbalize it.
Yeah, and I will point this out too, Jen. The one case that we've had the most success so far is Rebecca's, and we figured out a lot of stuff in that case file without actually having it. In fact, at one point, one of the state higher ups of the state police said that because I'm a journalist and so I write about a lot of this stuff, said that I had basically figured out everything in the case anyway, and that I had ruined their chances of getting an arrest, and told a family member that. And guess what? A year and a half later, they arrested somebody. So that was just a bunch of nonsense. And so having the case file is important, but like Jen said, if we don't have it, we will work our way.
I actually don't mind starting out without it, because it forces you to start fresh and it forces you to be innovative. And I love that. So like our process is nailing down, what do we actually know for sure about this crime? Like in the Judy Petty case, her parents are the most amazing couple you've ever met. They're 87 years old, but her dad is fixated on this boot print that he saw on the driveway of the family farm. And I'm like, but we don't have proof that that has anything to do with her disappearance or murder. So me and George sift through all of that. And what we do at the beginning of every case is just nail down what is actually a fact. And then we work from there. But anyways, if you want to help us, like, please join these groups or reach out to us and just help us brainstorm. Or if you have a specific skill set, like this girl emailed us, like 3 months ago out of the blue, and she goes, well, I'm into web design. And so I saw you guys don't have a website. So I created you guys a website for Linda's case. So
that's amazing.
You don't have to have a special skill set to help us. So,
or certainly not just a crime specific one, right?
Not at all.
You need all kinds of things.
You need everybody. Yeah. So just join our groups, communicate with us, and just know that we are like getting through this process of making this more official.
Yeah, I'll tell you
we'll be on the lookout, and I'll be sure to share when things do develop with a website or a landings page that you were talking about. I'll share that to our group, because we have members who are all over the world, all over the United States, who currently work in law enforcement, who are trying to go into law enforcement or forensic science or anything like that. So that connecting people is what makes your job happen. So that we'll do our best to help.
Yeah,
we need a psychologist to explain to us somehow dealing with some of the family members we've had to deal with. We've had some crazy stories on that front too. I
believe it. So I have a question here that I don't want to forget about in my scrolling. How do you go about establishing a working, trusting relationship with the local police department? Is it just through, really getting to know one another and talking about the work that you've done in the past? Does it still not really work? I know that some of the roadblocks that you've faced have involved just an unwillingness to get outsiders involved.
It depends on the agency. If they're willing to work with us, then it's not a problem. And actually, I will say this, our first case, they didn't want to work with us at all. They didn't want to help, but they were telling people that we were harming the investigation, which was not true. Now, in these other ones, Jen, I think it's fair to say there's been a softening. In Debbie's case, it seems like there was a softening, but not a lot's happened. They said the right things, but nothing's happening. These last two, there's been significant progress towards creating like a partnership or, you know, a working relationship. So Jen, I mean, that's kind of the way I see it. I don't know, how do you see it?
I forgot to mention on Linda's case, I'm not going to say the specific agency, but since we've gotten involved and been communicating with the detective over the case, they have added 2 more or requested assistance from 2 investigators at the state level, at a state level agency in Washington. And that's never happened before. So I think the methodology is working, where we gain their trust. Like, they were extremely apprehensive at first when I went in. They're like, are you here to put in a FOIA request for the case file? I'm like, no, I don't need it. Not right now. Like, we prefer to just start from scratch. I'm like, again, the only thing I asked for is like, please promise me you will take the tips and information we send you and follow up on them.
Yeah.
And they were, you know, they were very relieved by that. But obviously, like, this relationship is developing and it's working. Yeah.
It's been really interesting for me to follow along. My sort of assumption before I listened to all of your podcast episodes was that there would be a huge amount of resistance to anybody who isn't an active law enforcement officer with their department or within the state or whatever. But I think that, you know, getting away from that idea that too many cooks or the more hands creating more problems, it can really overcome some of the inside the box thinking that can happen when you don't have outside opinions and other sets of eyes to notice things. Another question we have is, are there any legal obstacles to the local police departments sharing their case files with trained citizens, or is it solely up to whether they want to or not?
So we have to them. And that's pretty much universal in every state. Most states, if the case is cold, or if they say they're still actively working it, they don't have to share those files with anybody, but they can do whatever they want.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
We have an extremely good understanding of of certain details that should be kept confidential and those that it doesn't matter, you know. So,
right.
In fact, I think we err to the more cautious side than we even should. But we do that because we don't want to burn any, because if they trust us, here's the thing, 99% of law agencies in this country are not going to work with a team like us. They're not going to do it. We know that, that's a reality. But if we can establish trust and if we can provide results, if we can help them along, the detective in Rebecca's case was on our Facebook page. He was following William Miller on our page. And also there was a key detail in that case file. Had we known about it 3 years ago, William Miller was in town that weekend and they knew it. And they didn't do anything on it for 16 years. Jennifer and I would have been, well, I mean, we might have gone to the Philippines. I mean, you say that's one of the countries you've never been to. So, I mean, but we knew he was in Oregon. We would have figured that part out, and we would have definitely gone to Oregon and we would have tracked this dude down and talked to him. Yeah. And that's the other thing. In Debbie's case, we created a case file. We interviewed everybody in the case virtually that had been interviewed by law enforcement originally. We created a case file, Jen, what, 2-3 times bigger than the original case file?
I don't know how many gigs it is, but
oh my goodness.
And we gave it all to the detective there. I literally drove down there and gave him a thumb drive with every single thing that we collected. So, and that's something else we do. Our methodology, like I always create a Google Share drive with the detective, and you know, we drop stuff in there for them to use. It's like, I don't just use it however you see best, you know.
Yeah.
But this isn't like, it's not a competition. We're not trying to like get our own information and beat them to the end. No, we're there to augment.
Everybody wins when the case is solved.
And honestly, like, people accuse us of like, oh, you're just in this for like fame and fortune. First of all, we're way in the red on expenses. Number two, we don't want our faces everywhere because it helps us when we go into a town and we knock on doors and nobody has any idea who we are. And that is like one of my issues with like the Dateline 2020 thing is like, I don't really want my face and name out there because
your opportunity to sit in a crowded sports bar might diminish.
Oh yeah, you heard that one.
I did.
That actually came back and bite us when we did a local TV spot because everywhere we went the next day, everyone knew who we were and what we were working on. So that was a problem. But the problem is there's a fine marriage line there between those two things, because if you're dealing with a cold case, The only way that you're going to get them to seriously take a look at it is you have to apply pressure, and that's through public, like through the media and through public pressure. And here's the thing. I covered West Memphis 3 for many, many years. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with that case. The thing that caused all that money, all that attention, all that happened was public pressure. And so sometimes we have to apply public pressure. And Jennifer, the first time we ever talked about this, I said, listen, you're gonna have to get used to going on TV some and doing this. And she goes, oh, no, I can't, we're not doing all that. And I'm like, listen, this is an unfortunate part of this process. So just smile and jump on TV and talk about these cases.
There's definitely some value there. We have another question. Hi, I'm from Australia. Have you ever worked on a cold case in Australia?
No, but I got a lot of fans in Australia. I got a lot of who message me and read my book, so I'm a fan of Australia.
That's exciting.
One part of our methodology is we always travel to the location before we ever go public with our involvement in a case. And
that might drive up your expenses a little bit.
We don't have the funding to go to other countries. We got a couple submissions from Hawaii last summer, and I was like, one of them was super intriguing. I'm like, we just can't afford this because it's out of our own pocket at this point. So no, we have not worked any in Australia, but we know we have a lot of followers in Australia, which is awesome.
Another thing, just it's not a written question, but a question that I just thought of. Are there any qualifiers that a case has to meet before you will get involved? I know you said you need to go visit the area and sort of feel things out a little bit, but
process.
Yeah.
I mean, and Jim, what were the 3 things? It was Debbie's case that we really came up with it. Solvability was number 1. Like, do we think it's within a range of being solvable? 2 is, do we have some access to contemporaneous reports, materials, interviews, anything, if there's some of that. And then 3, we like to have family buy-in, because one thing that we've noticed in this space, and it's not just us, you can go talk to people at CrimeCon, you can go talk to people at Dateline, you can talk to people at 2020. Some family members that are connected to some of these murder victims can be extremely difficult to deal with. Yeah. I don't know if it's the stress of losing a loved one. I don't know what it is, but it's just a weird dynamic. That's why I wasn't being facetious earlier when I said we kind of need a psychologist, because we don't know how to deal with some of these people sometimes, because sometimes it's like herding cats. In these cases, we've got a couple of siblings who are all on board, and then a couple of siblings who are going nuts and going crazy on us. And we're just like, sometimes we're juggling. We're not even studying the case. We're dealing with the family dynamic, which is insane.
But anytime emotions run that high, I can imagine things can get a little bit hectic.
I know that. Say one more thing on that topic. Sorry to interrupt you, but sure. We need a case where we feel like there's some behavioral analysis to be done, and where the crowdsourcing methodology is going to provide some forward progress. So I always cite this case, and it makes me so sad, but we couldn't do anything. So last summer we got a case, and I can't remember which family member submitted it, but their loved one had been killed walking on an interstate in Texas. It was a hit and run. Mm-hmm. There's just not much we can do with that. Right. So we look for cases, me personally, where the killer took extra time at the crime scene. Because behavioral analysis is one of my big things, and we don't need the case file to do that kind of analysis. So obviously in Linda's case that we're working now, not only did they stab her more times than they needed to, they took the time to set the place on fire. So that provides a ton of clues about motive, the potential relationship to the victim, and stuff like that. And so for me personally, I look for those attributes in a case, because again, we go into a case assuming we're not going to get the case file. Now, well, 2 out of 4, I guess, we have gotten it. But we know law enforcement isn't always going to provide it, and that's fine. But there's got to be something that we can work with. So that's one
of course you're not going to be personally testing physical evidence yourselves. No,
capacity to do that.
Yeah. Now we know people, and so we have genetic genealogists that have reached out offering their services. We have a DNA extraction person willing to offer her services. Like, we have experts we're connected to that can provide that kind of stuff. But me and George, that is not our arena.
Right. Another question on our chat is, do you have any FBI friends to get a leg in to help with federal cases, or do you have the desire to do so at all?
The FBI is not going to bring us on, I don't think. that was,
Then the things that we bring to the table, theoretically, the FBI already should have access to.
We
Like,
hope.
Yeah, we hope. I mean, like, they should have arson experts, they should have knife experts, they should have people like Jennifer. And she always sells herself short on this, but she's very, very good at behavioral analysis. And so they have people like that, obviously. I mean, some of the most famous FBI agents ever came right out of the behavioral analysis unit. So no, we're not good enough yet to supersede the FBI.
We prefer like
someday.
really, well, we're learning. So this is always a learning process. We're evolving case to case. But we learned in these last two, like working with a pretty tiny department in both these cases, I think we can bring a lot more to the table for them. You know, in Linda's case, Port Orchard PD, I don't know how many police officers or detectives they have, but I know it's minimal, it's small. They don't have a knife expert. They don't have an arson expert. They haven't had that analysis done on the case before, but we can provide that to them for free. And then they can use it to their advantage. But like George says, the FBI has all that. So it's not that we wouldn't want to work a federal case. I just don't know that there's a lot we can bring to the table for them.
I think that part of what makes the work that you do so amazing is that you can connect people like Francine Bardol, who use innovative methods to extract DNA from things that even if they had tried to test for DNA, if they had the technology, it's gotten so much better now with the continuously evolving technology. And it's just, not everybody has those resources. And
Jen,
it's neat that you can connect it.
We've never used him, but Jared Bradley at MVAC, he's been on my podcast. He's
not yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying, not yet. But I mean, his story is just great, how that whole system came about and how they use it. It's incredible.
It was designed for food safety, right?
Yes,
that's exactly right. His dad was a food scientist.
And the other thing is, like, even if we have a professional or like an expert, like say MVAC, right? They charge. Okay, so if they're unwilling to provide their services for free, in every case, we get followers who are like, can I donate some money to the reward fund? Or do you need money for expert analysis or whatever? And like, if the department can't get the funding that they need, we'll figure that out. We'll get it for them.
We got a grant in Debbie's case to get some testing done.
So
we have, do you have a favorite area of research?
I think me is behavioral analysis and like injury analysis. Those are my top two. If you go on my YouTube channel, I have a couple detailed videos of Rebecca Gould's injuries because they're very, very unique. And once we figured out the angles of her two injuries and then how the injuries had to have been delivered by a blunt force object, it gave us so much insight into the killer. And that's not every case, but I think injury analysis, it gives us so much, new interpretation of what probably happened during that crime.
Certainly.
I think my favorite part is interviewing. Obviously, I come from a journalism background, and so I like going out and talking to the not just the suspects, but like talking to the people of interest, the people who have information to give. Like, I'll give you an example. So in Debbie's case, we wanted to talk to Paul. Well, Jennifer called Paul at work and kind of surprised him. And so he stayed on the phone and kept talking to her. And of course, she recorded the conversation. It was very interesting. And so we had his phone number and, we would call him, text him. I called and texted him a bunch, never would. I went by his work. He like literally ran out the door when I came. And so I'm like, man, how am I going to get this guy? So one day I was sitting around with my podcast producer and we were just chatting. I know I told you this, Jennifer, before I did it. But I was like, I thought it would be interesting to talk about some of the stuff that was going to be DNA tested through that grant. We didn't know it was going to be tested, but we started speculating on a podcast that maybe the towels would be tested. The next day, I'm getting ready to record with Jennifer on Break the Case, and guess who's blowing my phone up?
Of course.
And he's coming up with this story, and I talked to him for over an hour, and he's trying to come up with this cockamamie story about how he took a shower in that house the day before. And you know, what he knows now, because he's read the book, obviously, is that we knew where he took a shower the day before, which sounds insane because this happened years before I was born. But
Right.
we actually knew because we had the police reports, and there was a report about them all going to the lake the day before, and they all took a shower at Debbie's parents' cabin house. So so that's probably my favorite part, because I do like looking them in the eye and asking them the tough questions.
I love knocking on doors, like not giving anybody a heads up that we're coming.
You like
And
to see a little bit of the pressure in action.
And I never, so far, I don't think, George, I don't think we've had a door slammed in our face. So
Just
No,
people
other than the one
running
guy
out
who
the
was
side.
clearly high on meth, who, you know, didn't
no, but
say
he gave us the information we needed. So
that's true.
he didn't slam the door in our face. He didn't want us there, but yeah. But I do love that. We did some of that in West Virginia this past weekend.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite people to hear from are, you know, Debbie's friends from back in the day, talking about everyone's relationship, and you can learn so much from them. You know, everyone is going to have an opinion based on how they feel about somebody, but I think that it can be pretty enlightening to, you know, learn personalities and stuff like that when you're looking at something from so long ago too. The memories aspect, it's
yeah,
I enjoy hearing their stories. Someone asks, is your podcast anywhere in addition to Spotify?
Yeah, Break the Case is on iHeart, Google, Apple.
Okay. I think it's on Amazon Prime too.
I'm sure it is, yeah.
And then
Diamond State's on more than Spotify, I know that. Stitcher,
yes,
it's on Apple.
Google, yeah.
We mainly share, I share a lot of Spotify links because that's usually where I listen to podcasts, but I'm sure if you can't find it, message me and let me know and I'll find it for you. Another question from an attendee is, what is your motive for solving these cases? What is your drive to put yourself in these, what could be compromising situations?
I guess I'll go first, Jen. The day that Rebecca's body was found and I had to tell her dad that, I never forgot about that. That stayed with me throughout my entire career, through the many years of it not being solved. I still have that missing poster sitting on my desk, and it just really bothered me. And then I covered West Memphis 3 for many years. And, you know, when you're sitting in court with all these experts and you're looking at the evidence in the case, and you're looking at the testimony and everything else, and you're looking at 3 little kids who got murdered, and you see their faces. And I remember Michael Moore always really touched me because he has the same birthday as my son. Not that they weren't the same age, but the same birthday. And so on autopsy photos, what a lot of people don't know is a lot of times there's a stamp on the picture, and the stamp is their birthday. And this kid looked like my kid. He had dark eyes and kind of brown wavy hair. And the first time I saw the autopsy picture for Michael, he was 8 years old, just like my son was 8 at the time. And so I sat in court day after day, and I just kept seeing that. And then, you know, they show all the pictures, you know, what they have to do an autopsy. They basically have to dissect the body. And I was just sitting there thinking to myself, if this was me, if this happened to my son, I would move heaven. I would do anything. And so I feel that pain. So like when Jennifer came along and we became good friends, and she wanted to do this type of work, that's what motivates me, is that if I can just look like Dr. Gould, for as imperfect as this situation is with him, we told him the night before we were at his house when he was writing his victim impact statement. And I said, Doc, there are many, many families that I know that would do anything to do what you're doing tonight.
Yeah.
And he,
yeah. I don't know. I'm very, very analytical by nature, and I just love breaking down a murder like second by second. But also, I've told George and many people this a million times, especially with regards, like I always reference Rebecca because that was a case we worked the longest, but like somebody bludgeoned me in the head and dumped me on the side of the road like trash. I'd want someone to be my advocate because nobody was her advocate for years.
100%.
Yeah, like, so I think that those are the two things that drive me. Like, I know that we can help, and I can't prevent murders from happening, but hell, if we can apply our skills and the skills of everybody else in our groups that helps us to solve a few, why not? I mean, it's every victim deserves some kind of justice.
I think that everyone who gets involved in this sort of work has to be of that helper personality or moral drive anyway. So it just makes sense. I can definitely understand and relate to both of your whys. There's another question. Ree says it's the last question from her, but she says, do you have a favorite podcast other than your own?
Your Own Backyard is a fantastic example of a citizen detective, or whatever you want to call them, that took on a case and affected major change and got somebody convicted. The sentencing for that guy, I think, is March 10th, I read, but that is absolutely one of my favorites. I like Real Crime Profile with Jim Clementi, but I personally gravitate towards podcasts where a whole season is about one case, because I really like getting into the nitty-gritty and all the little details and stuff like that. And I like hearing how cases evolve. And I also learn from some of those too, like, oh, that's a good idea. They did that. Hey, George, maybe we should do something like that. So I think I learn more from those, but pretty much anything true crime is my addiction.
Yeah.
How about you, George?
I like a lot of different, I like Criminal. That was the first podcast, true crime podcast I listened to. Someone Knows Something.
Yes.
Oh, I like that one too.
Yeah.
That is probably my favorite. If I had to pick one out of all of them. I also like Payne Lindsay's, a lot of his stuff. But those would probably be the ones. Someone Knows Something is so good to me that if I'm out on a walk with my dogs, I can listen to it again and again. I think I've listened to that Carrie Brown season probably 4 times, because for whatever reason, that case just haunts me. That 15-year-old girl that vanished and they found her the next day. And I know that case can be solved. I know it in my heart. Sometimes I just want to go to Manitoba and help if I could.
Yeah, Up and Vanished is another great example of, Payne Lindsay. He self-admittedly, he's like, I didn't know what I was doing. I just decided to look into this missing woman case and record as I went along. And oh my gosh, I give him all the credit in the world, because people are like, well, he didn't solve it. And it's like, that, first of all, that's not what it's about. But guess what? He got the critical key witness to come forward to law enforcement with the information they needed. So that's as good in my book. But yeah, that's a great podcast, Up and Vanished season 1. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Jesse. All right. I think we've gone through all of our questions. Ree, is there anything that I missed from the Facebook Live?
No, ma'am. In fact, I'm going to stop the live stream now and then stop the recording, so that, it doesn't have to be